Welcome to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.
Hi, everyone. Taylor Kennedy here on a brand new edition of the All Eers podcast. We appreciate however you are listening to us. You can find us on any of your podcast streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube by searching HD Media Game Day and finding the latest on everything related to this podcast, along with our streaming platform. And with the spring sports season right around the corner, we will have baseball and softball coming up on the live streaming platforms. So, women's basketball this weekend, in the grand scheme of things, a really big deal. First time since 1992 that the West Virginia women's basketball team is hosting home regional games in the NCAA tournament. And what better to get a better understanding, a better landscape of what's been going on with the women's basketball team following its 9-point victory in the Big 12 Conference Championship game just a few weeks ago against TCU. Then the play-by-play voice of the West Virginia University women's basketball team, Mr. Andrew Caridi. Andrew, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Taylor.
So, Andrew, to start, I know in our last episode, Quinn Roby and I were talking about the ticket sales and the environment that will be surrounding this weekend, especially on Saturday when WVU takes on Miami of Ohio at 5 p.m. To start, let's talk about that. So, do you feel like that side of things with the crowd? I mean, this team's played in front of a crowd of 10,000 fans this season, which in large part was on Education Day in front of a bunch of screaming kids. But then you played two other games towards the end of the season in front of crowds that eclipsed over 6,000 attendees. Do you feel that the crowd will be a major implication for WVU, and how do you kind of see that going both ways?
Yeah, no, I think it's an enormous advantage. I'm not already jumping to the second game. Hopefully, that West Virginia will be playing it against Kentucky, but we'll get to there in a second. Yeah, no, I think the style that West Virginia plays and having at least 11,000 behind it is absolutely awesome. So, for those unaware or haven't watched West Virginia play this season, they are high octane, high disruption, high turnover, high steal style of basketball. And the number one thing that I've seen in the 3 years from Mark Kellogg is that fans have learned to appreciate that and know when the team is clicking and get behind. And the players themselves have said that the energy that they get from the 6,000 or perhaps more gives them energy, and that's only half the building, right? So when they're doing that, when you have double that number and you're disrupting and you're being active, the tides are working in your favor. Yes, absolutely 100%. The style and the fact that Mountaineer fans are absolutely rabid is going to be a huge advantage. You
look at what Kellogg has been able to do in his first two seasons. He's won 25 games in his first two seasons. In each of the first two seasons, I should say, 50 combined wins. They've obviously eclipsed that mark this season. I believe they're 27-6 right now as we enter the NCAA tournament. Just from what Kellogg has been able to build in these 3 years, do you think what they're accomplishing now is a culmination of what's come before this year's team?
How do you mean what's come before? You mean like the work that he's put in the previous 2 years?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you bring Jordan Harrison in year one, transfer from SFA, who was there with Coach Kellogg, and then it's going to be year two for Sydney Shaw. She said herself that she's like a million times more comfortable in the system, who she's played with, and obviously Sydney Shaw, senior shooting guard, massive game against TCU in the championship game. But she said that, in year one, she was still looking back when she would take shots and be like, was it a good shot? Was it a bad shot? And was still trying to adjust to the free nature that Coach Kellogg gives them. So, she is now kind of thinking more unconscious and playing more unconscious in the system. So it was a portal-heavy class, but, 100%. I mean, I think, Rome wasn't built in a day. So it takes a while to get things cooking, and certainly has. Third time has been a charm, kind of the theme of the season, right? You lost 2 to TCU, but you finally beat them in the tournament game. That's important. No coach has ever won 25 games in a row in 3 years. Back to back to back. Mark Kellogg becomes the first coach to do that. There's 100% like a building trend and a constructive trend here that is going forward. It makes sense. If you've been following this team from the Iowa game, which I think for many people is kind of like the first exposure they've had to this women's team, you know that this has been a long time, short time coming. Let's call it like an overnight success, but 2 nights or 3 nights instead of 1.
That's a good line at the end. I like that. The overnight more than anything. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So when you look at this team's dynamic, obviously it starts with Jordan Harrison, the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. You mentioned Sydney Shaw, And Gia Cook is also along the lines as a really good piece of that backcourt. But then I think that front court as well, when you look at it, Mimi Wheeler, especially during the Big 12 Conference Tournament, definitely emerged as a very key piece of this bigger puzzle that we're seeing with this Mountaineer team. How important will it be for this Mountaineer team to move forward in the NCAA tournament around what Mimi's trying to do game in and game out to try and help them move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like from a broad perspective, West Virginia having that rebounding scoring presence inside is the 100% difference between the teams 1 and 2 years ago to now. You just didn't have that type of ability close to the basket. Yes, you had J.J. Quinterly, who's one of the all-time greats for West Virginia, but you didn't have that variety in scoring and you didn't have that advantage in rebounding. So, like, people who pay attention to women's basketball on a national level, who are the two best teams in the country? That's UConn and that's UCLA. And who do they have? Sarah Strong, who's like, the best player in the country, National Player of the Year for a lot of people for UConn. And then you have Lauren Betts for UCLA. And what are they? They're forwards who are back to the basket, super dynamic, and score, rebound, do everything. West Virginia didn't have that until this year. So you get Mimi Wheeler, a grad transfer, experienced kid. You're not getting a sophomore from a mid-major level. Mimi came from Norfolk State. Her teammates call her grandma because she's older than most of them, right? But there's no drop off or adjustment period outside of like getting used to the system, right? So she's mature enough to do that. She's mature enough in her game. And Carter McRae also had a wonderful Big 12 tournament. She was a monster on the boards. Yep. Huge piece for West Virginia. She didn't score a whole lot. She didn't have to score a whole lot. She just needed to grab the rebounds and do what you needed to do. So I think, like you say, down low for West Virginia and close to the basket, along with the development of Sydney Shaw and Jordan Harrison giving you, her best season, that's kind of been the secret sauce here this year.
Yeah, it's really important just to kind of talk about all these different pieces because, again, you win the Big 12 Conference Tournament for the first time since 2017, and that was a really big factor in this. Again, I'll just use the phrase, the bigger puzzle, and I think moving forward as we get to this break, but we'll talk more player individuals here in a second. We'll talk about Jordan Harrison as we take a break here on the All Eers podcast.
HD Media Game Day is your streaming home for the best in live high school sports across West Virginia. Featuring football, basketball, soccer, and more, HD Media Game Day brings the action to you for free, exclusively on our YouTube channel and at hdmediagameday.com. When you can't make it to the game, HD Media Game Day has you covered.
As the game gets faster, stronger, more dynamic, your equipment has to keep up. Introducing the Riddell Axiom, the next evolution in football protection, designed to match the speed and strength of today's athlete. Contact West Virginia Riddell representative Casey Turley at 304-552-5960. Gear up, play smart, stay protected.
Welcome back into the third edition of the All Eers podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. You can follow us on any of our social media platforms. You can follow us on Twitter at Gazmail Sports. That's G-A-Z Mail Sports. You can follow us on Facebook at HD Media Sports. And you can follow us on YouTube by searching up HD Media Game Day, which is where all of our live streaming action will go on. So again, on YouTube, HD Media Game Day. We're continuing our conversation here with the play-by-play voice of the West Virginia women's basketball announcer, Andrew Caridi. And Andrew, we talked some about the players in the last segment, but I want to go back to Jordan Harrison. Again, Defensive Player of the Year this year in the Big 12 Conference. She came with Mark Kellogg from Stephen F. Austin whenever Kellogg took the job 3 years ago. In regards to Jordan's legacy, how important is this moment or these next couple of games, if WVU were to advance, impacted by her legacy, if at all?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, actually, because I was texting one of my buddies today, like, where does she fall in the, West Virginia lexicon of, like, all-time great athletes? I think for her to establish herself as, like, an unforgettable I'll preface with this. I think pure talent, she is probably the best point guard that West Virginia has ever had on both sides of the ball. Like, you go back to Rosemary Kozorek, and I know her, Rosemary Kozorek is the comp, right? Mm-hmm. So she probably hold that regard right now in her statistics, but like, think of how long ago that was. We're talking decades ago. So the game has come a long way. I think that Jordan has already solidified herself as an all-time great, obviously, because if you look at what she did in the Big 12 tournament, like that is enough for her to be in that conversation, because she was the best offensive performer for West Virginia in the championship game. She had a game-high 21. She knocked the ball loose away from Colorado when it was a 1-point game to secure the win for West Virginia, like stole the ball. They were trying to get to the basket with 2 seconds to go. So like you're talking 2 big-time moments for her in short and in big. And then, yeah, if you go to a Sweet 16 with your, point guard leading the way, who's been here the whole time, Mark Kellogg has been here, yeah, absolutely sends her into the stratosphere. So, yeah, it's interesting to talk about. I think she's already there. But, if you go to a Sweet 16, then, yeah, man, she's an all-time legend.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually talking about this amongst media members. I can't remember which home game it was. It might have been the Cincinnati game, but what you said is exactly what we were discussing. Where does she fall, regardless of what happens moving forward? Where does she fall all-time wise? And I agree with you. If you can get to that Sweet 16, she's already there. But if you get to that Sweet 16, you're already launched into the stratosphere, and I'm 100% with you. You just also look at other great players, even since 2000. You got Tyneese Martin, J.J. Quinterly, Kaiser Gondrzik, Meg Bolger as well. I mean, those are some really iconic names in the grand scheme of things of WVU women's basketball, and you hit the nail right on the head. I'm 100% in agreement with you with that. In regard, kind of going back now to that pressure that we alluded to in the first segment, do you think that this team plays more consistently, I guess you could say, whenever there is a bigger crowd? And do you think along that line that will kind of cause problems when going again? I mean, it would cause problems for Miami of Ohio in this first round game?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first time West Virginia goes on an 8-0, 9-0, 10-0 run, which they have done against basically every team that they've played against, whether it be outside the Big 12, in non-conference play, I think that's going to be a whoa moment, because say you're on a 6-0 run, right? Then you steal the ball in transition, you hit a 3, that's going to be enormously loud, and Miami probably has not played against that. There's probably very few players on that team that have experienced something like that. I'm sure they can bounce back from it, but West Virginia definitely way more comfortable at home, and like this has been discussed ad nauseum, right? Kind of a flaw, or in this case, an advantage for West Virginia is how the NCAA tournament is formatted, with the 4 seeds or higher getting home court. If you play Iowa 3 years ago in a neutral court, West Virginia probably wins that game, maybe, probably. You go to UNC last year. That was a huge advantage for North Carolina. They're playing in their own gym.
Yep.
They get to sleep in their own beds. They go through the same process. They get to eat the same food that they probably eat for other home games. So you throw that with 10,000 plus cheering for you, yeah, 100%. That's a big time advantage.
Kind of going back to the question I asked you about Jordan Harrison, take it from the standpoint of Mark Kellogg, because again, as you mentioned, it's the 3rd consecutive season that he's won at least 25 games. He won 25 games in each of his first 2 seasons. He's now got 27 wins leading into the NCAA tournament. Where do you think he lies historically with some of these all-time great Mountaineer coaches, regardless of it being women's basketball? Where has he cemented himself with some of these greats, especially in his first 3 seasons?
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know that anybody has kind of jumped in here and done as well as he's done in such a short amount of time. Like in terms of national prominence, winning championships. It's funny, because like you could say the same thing about Steve Saban's the Mountaineer baseball coach.
Yep.
It's like he jumped in, had been here for 10 years, obviously, but like he goes out, wins a regional, wins a conference championship in year 1. It's like that doesn't happen. And we know that West Virginia women's coaches in the past have been here for like a long time. With Coach Carey and the ones that like came before him. So yeah, it's hard to compare because there's never really been anything like that, and the factor of college athletics being completely different than they were. Even 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, he's definitely in a league of his own, and he's proven to be just a super, super good coach. And like his personality is a huge reason for that. He's hands off. He's super prepared, super honest, super transparent. Just to sing his praises a little bit, but he does everything the right way.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the personality side of things. You listen to him. I know you're around him a lot more than the average Joe is in WVU media, but just listening to him in a regular post-game press conference or just a weekly press conference, his attention to detail to me is what really stands out to me. And I think his preparedness and how much they prepare for an individual team, regardless if they're playing that team once or twice, or now even a rare occurrence with TCU 3 times, dude, I just kind of sit back and I'm just like, whoa, I did not catch up on that. And I pay attention to basketball pretty thoroughly. He's just all ingrained into it, right?
Yeah, and it's awesome too because he is hyper prepared. He's hyper knowledgeable. Knows exactly what's coming. He's a top 3 or 4 active winningest coaches in the country right now, like along with Gino Auriemma and all those other guys. But with that, he is not like obsessive to a fault. He still understands that this is a game, still understands that he doesn't have full control over literally everything that happens in every possession. So he can be hands off and he can still be very candid and still be very open and doesn't stress over the stuff that he can't control, right? So like he can control all he can control, but also understands that there is that chaotic factor of sports and weird things happen, and he can accept that, which I think kind of makes, that's kind of like his secret ability, is that he can accept the things that happen, adjust to them, but also understands, you know, I will win if I am as prepared as I can possibly be and trust the players that I'm putting on the floor.
I want to leave you with this, and we're going to get you out of here, but think about this. So I did a deep dive with Kellogg and what he's been able to succeed. So he's won 77 games in his first 3 seasons at WVU, okay? If you look at the grand scheme of things between men's and women's basketball, the only coach that sits ahead of him with wins in their first 3 seasons is Bob Huggins. He won 80 games in his first 3 seasons. Now, that can change, obviously, if Kellogg and WVU were to go into a deep run this season in the NCAA tournament, but that's also big. Winning percentage-wise, he sits right around 78%. There are 2 people ahead of him that have a better winning percentage in their first 3 seasons. Lee Patton and George King, both over 80%. Now, the final thing, Kellogg is the only full-time women's basketball coach to win a conference title in his first 3 seasons. Think about that. That's just, again, what you said and what I've been saying. His legacy's been cemented, but now it's just how much further can you take that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think he's continuing to stress like the Big 12 tournament championship being super exciting, but the job's done yet. I think in a non-direct way, you know, if you kind of fluked your way into it, if you weren't a top 2 team, you know, you have the argument you probably should have won the regular season championship too throughout this year. Then you kind of, you know, you rest on your laurels a little bit, let the chips fall as they may. But this West Virginia team is legitimately talented enough to make a Sweet 16, and I'd be surprised if they didn't, considering they're at home, and I'm fascinated by this Kentucky matchup. Kentucky really plays like a different style to West Virginia. They actually have a negative turnover ratio. They don't steal the ball all that much. They're super half-court oriented. So that is definitely an interesting blend of styles. Of course, West Virginia gets by Miami, and UK gets by James Madison.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, brother, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you for the conversation, and look forward to seeing you this weekend up in Morgantown.
It'll be a blast, Taylor. I'm excited to see you, and I know tickets were sold out in like an hour, so it's going to be hard to get one. But you're going to feel the energy in Morgantown because you got baseball going on. You got 4 teams here, obviously, that are all relatively close to Morgantown. So yeah, it's going to be a super special weekend. That's why we do this stuff.
As some people say, it'll be like a hoot and a holler. How about that?
Yeah, sure.
All right, brother. I'll see you on the other side. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. That is the play-by-play voice of the West Virginia University women's basketball team, Andrew Caridi. Final break to take here on the All Ears podcast. We'll talk about the WVU men's basketball team accepting the invitation to this year's the Crown basketball tournament, or as some people just call it, the College Basketball Crown, which is held in Las Vegas. We'll talk more about that here on the other side of this break on the All Ears podcast.
Oh, good gravy. The kind made from real premium sausage. The kind that's smothered over deliciousness. The kind you can only get at Tudor's Biscuit World. That's the gravy that's oh so good. It's the perfect topping to your biscuits or your taters, and even makes a delicious side. It's oh so good gravy. Tudor's Biscuit World. We're dripping with oh good gravy.
HD Media Sports is your one-stop destination for top high school and college sports coverage in the Mountain State. From Morgantown to Mingo County, our award-winning reporters keep you informed about your favorite teams and players, including exclusive coverage of the Marshall Thundering Herd and the West Virginia Mountaineers. Follow HD Media Sports on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest news, features, and game coverage.
Final segment here on the All Ears podcast. We appreciate our time with Andrew Caridi. Let's shift our focus now to men's basketball. If they have accepted the invitation to the College Basketball Crown, which will be held inside the MGM Grand Garden Arena and T-Mobile Arena from Wednesday, April 1st to Sunday, April the 5th. WVU opens their play against Stanford. This will actually be the first time that the two teams have played each other since December 28th, 1959. So my historians out there, 1959, the last time that the Mountaineers and the Cardinals took the floor against one another, and they will do so in Las Vegas with the winner playing either Rutgers or Creighton. So it should be a fun, exciting event for this Mountaineers team. It's actually a really interesting event as well, just from a lot of different angles. And there's an NIL prize pool of $500,000, which obviously makes the game a little bit more interesting, probably a little bit more competitive in a lot of different ways. And a lot of different teams in this as well: Baylor, Colorado, Minnesota, Oklahoma as well, along with the other four teams on the opposite side of the bracket. Like I said, WVU, Stanford, Rutgers, and Creighton. We appreciate you guys for listening to today's podcast. You can be sure to follow us on our social media platforms. On Twitter at Gaz Mail Sports, that's GAZ Mail Sports. You can be sure to follow us on Facebook at HD Media Sports and check us out on our YouTube page, HD Media Game Day. This is the last podcast of the week. We will see you all next week, and we will talk more women's basketball and other things involving West Virginia University athletics. This is the All Ears Podcast.
You have been listening to the All Ears Podcast, powered by HD Media.